Now, yes, we're live on LinkedIn. And on YouTube. Yes. Just a second. Okay, perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone, and good evening. Welcome to all of you all from SciRio. I am Suchita Champak, the founder of SciRio, and this is our first event, live event, which we started out to discuss journeys of science communicators. And I have Shweta, who's the co-host for this show. And she is a student, a bachelor student at the Regional Institute of Education, Mysore. And today's guest, we have Spoorthy Raman. Just before we dive into it, I just want to, since it's our first show, I'm super excited and a little nervous, but as the show has to go on, I'm just going to start off and talk to you all a little bit about SciRio. SciRio was initiated 2 years ago, but then it pivoted multiple times, and currently we are focusing on two aspects. One is communicating science itself, and the second part of SciRio is to enable students and researchers to communicate science, right? So it could be in terms of training, support, in terms of mentorship, resource building, etc. Right? So that's the crux of SciRio, and the whole reason to start off SciComm Souls, the current show, is to show people how unique and different journeys of science communicators so far have been, and it's just to give you all a glimpse of their ups and downs, their learnings, and also some things that they'd probably known a little earlier to become a better science communicator, and all of the fun around that, right? So today we have Spoorthy Raman, and I'd really like Shweta to introduce our guest for today. Go on, Shweta.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much, Suchita. This initiative has been wonderful, and I'm also equally excited and nervous like you are. So thank you so much, Spoorthy, for joining us. So to introduce Spoorthy, I mean, we're sure she doesn't need an introduction, but Spoorthy is a science writer, editor, and a columnist. She was the managing editor at Research Matters, which is a multilingual science news portal in India. She writes on a wide range of topics, but I think animals are her favorite. And she has also moderated various webinars, been a part of voluntary science communication efforts, both in English and Kannada. She also has written to Deccan Herald, which is, again, as I mentioned, she's a columnist there. She also has won multiple awards, including the Merit Prize in the Asian Scientist Writing Prize in 2017 and EurekAlert in 2019. So we are very excited to have you here, Spoorthy. So to begin with, let's not waste any more time. How did you transition from being a techie to a science writer?
Okay, thanks, Shweta, and thanks, Suchita. First, let me take this opportunity to say, okay, thanks for having me for your first season. I mean, this month has been quite unique because this is my second opportunity to share something like this. And while as journalists, we are the ones asking questions to other people, asking about their journeys in life, this is quite a unique position to be, I say. So with my transition, right, like Suchita mentioned, there's no one route to being a science communicator, and especially when I was probably studying or when I was actually working as well. I never knew there was even a career called a science writer or a communicator or a science journalist. And journalism was something that was not even in the radar or scheme of things that I was remotely even involved with. However, I had some interest with writing from a very long time. I used to be this magazine editors, which you would have these school magazines, college magazines, and that's a consistent role I think I played all through my student career as well as later on. And I actually genuinely enjoyed that. Writing about different things, not necessarily science at any point in time. And then writing short stories in some capacities, in writing poetry, most of it for my own consumption, of course. And again, magazines, student magazines, I really don't know how many people would actually read them, but I would like to just work on them to get the content out. So when I graduated out of my bachelor's, from UVC. UVC is an engineering college in Bangalore, and it's one of the oldest colleges that you can find in this part of the country. So once I did that, and then I realized that I wanted to do a master's. So I went to IIT Bangalore, which is the International Institute of Information Technology. Again, that is in Bangalore. It's an electronic city and one of its kind of universities. And once I graduated from there, during that time, I was like this full-blown techie, busy with hack days, busy with coding and stuff like that. I joined Cisco. And there, I did enjoy my work being an IT engineer. I was involved in a lot of things other than just my, day job, so to say. There was a lot of innovation projects going on. So basically, I think over past few years, I realized that there is always this drive in me to try different things and not just stick to one thing over the course of time. So I think the fact that I also realized that I could do multiple things kind of pushed me to explore what else I could do from what I was doing. And that's when I was also about 3 years into my career, had a glimpse of what a techie's career is going to be. So obviously it was time for me to look beyond it. Not that I was disillusioned with what I was doing. I just loved it. But then I just wanted to see what else I could do. And that's when I got this opportunity, or rather came across this call for science writers at what used to be the IISc's Science Media Center. I had applied, and that application was like long lost. I did not hear back, and I was like wondering what's happening. And then I just wrote to Sandhya, who was like the editor at that point in time, and she accidentally also had lost the email, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't get back to you. Okay, here's how we get started." And then I wrote the sample internship pieces, and again, I didn't hear back, and I was like, "Okay, maybe it's not working out." And then she wrote back saying that, "Okay, I'm so sorry, I didn't get back to you later." And and that's when it kind of started, and I liked it. I liked the fact that I was writing about what's happening at IISc, and IISc was an institution I had been to a couple of times. I attended various computer science related summer schools, etc., as part of different fellowships. So I liked the campus. So I was really hoping that this kind of opportunity gave me more. Like I could visit the campus more often or talk to people. But on the personal side, I was, on my own journey of getting married, and that because of marriage, I would have to move to South Africa. So that gave me the space to kind of reflect on what I really wanted to do, because I hadn't really resigned from Cisco. I was in a sabbatical, so I had my options open. But during that 1 year during the sabbatical, I was invested more in science writing. So, and then obviously I came to love my job. And after my sabbatical got over, I told people at Cisco that I'm not going to continue with this because I think I found what I like to do. And that's how I made the big switch. And coincidentally, it so happened that what was earlier the Science Media Center, Sandhya, who was the editor, had to go on leave. And then I was like, asked to kind of take things into charge in some sense. So that's probably where the routing kind of began. So I was a science communicator or a science writer in India, based out of a different continent altogether, but it worked. So in 2016, I became the managing editor of Science Media Center at that point in time, and then at that point in time we were just covering what happened at IAC. While we were doing that, we realized that Indian science is way beyond IAC, right? Because IAC is just one of the institutes that produces a lot of science outputs, but then there is a lot more to it. So that's when me, a couple of colleagues at Gubi Labs kind of came together and said, okay, this is not, we're not going to limit ourselves with IAC. And that's where we started Research Matters. With Research Matters, what we were very clear about was that we were going to cover a lot of scientific outputs from different parts of India, different institutes of India, and not just restrict ourselves to IAC. And we were also very clear that this was going to be multilingual in some form, although we kind of staged this whole process because we obviously started with English, and a few days later we introduced Kannada and then Hindi, and now I think we have more than like 5 languages out there. So that's when Research Matters was born, and then I kind of stuck, obviously. For the last 5 years, I've been at the helm of pretty much everything, and thanks to a very great organizational support and a great team of editors that we had inside, the team, as also the freelance writers who would contribute to our stuff. So over time, I just built this whole team, if I may call so. Mentoring a few people on the way, telling them what I know of science writing, which obviously was something I learned on the job, and I didn't go to any formal training or anything. But it was, I think what was also important for me was to just keep a sense of where science writing is going from a global perspective. So what people are writing about, what are some of the really good science writing initiatives, because I would call myself more of a writer because I've just played around with the writing medium, not so much other mediums. So I just kept learning things on the job because I just knew how to write when I got in, and I didn't know anything about science writing. And until recently, it's funny because when I give different seminars and sessions on science writing, some of the words that I use today are my new learnings, like what's a nut graph. I didn't know. If someone would ask me about that, like, say 3 years ago, I would be like a blank slate. And I had the privilege and opportunity to kind of participate in a few contests, and also look at a few awards. And one of the good things that happened during this journey was me going to the US as part of the EurekAlert fellowship. So it kind of exposed me to a whole different world. And then personal move. I moved from India to Canada, where I'm right now based. So then I thought, okay, doing things from here, maybe I could do something more broad-based, because geographically I'm in a different continent altogether. And that's when I thought I'll switch to being a freelancer, and here I am.
That's amazing. Your journey is something that I was really I really wanted to know, because something of a techie to a writer is quite a transition, right? So I've seen a lot of science communicators who've conducted research, or maybe in the industry, and then move to science writing. But thank you so much for giving us that brief overview. But in a nutshell, if I want you to tell us what SciComm means to you.
Well, okay. So science is viewed with a lot of lenses from a public perspective, right? For some people, science is like the Bible of things, meaning that they do refer, like, everything needs to be quote unquote science based, evidence based for some people in their everyday lives. For some people, science is more like a ivory tower. Oh, this is something that I cannot even reach. I mean, I don't know what science is. Like my own brother, he's like, I don't care. I don't know what you guys do, and he generally has nothing to do with science, kind of a person. And that's interesting because not to be really boasty of my privilege, but then that's interesting because my dad is a PhD, so it's like he's a zoologist, and for my brother to kind of really have this, I was like a fly on the wall to try and kind of capture what kind of conversations go on from somebody who has been in the academia for quite long, to somebody who's like not even interested. But it's not to say he's a naysayer. Of course, when presented with some kind of evidence, with some kind of reason and logic, of course he will grasp what it is. And then there are some people who are very skeptical. They're like, this whole thing is made up. And we see a lot of that in terms of people who think climate change is not real or vaccines are not real. So there is like this whole spectrum of how people actually absorb science. So for me, that was very interesting, and it was a very interesting thought experiment as well. So for me, science communication is basically, it has to do a few things. When you say something about science to people around you who have very remotely something to do with science, first they need to be interested in it, because if they are not interested, you can't further the conversation, right? Because any conversation starts with interest. So I think science communication first needs to bring that interest among people, and then it needs to kind of once you have people's eyeballs or ears or whatever plugged in, then you can actually reason things out and present different kinds of thoughts about something. Again, there is no one single thought, like the way there is no one size fits all. For example, right now we are seeing the discussion about where the virus originated. So there is no one single line of thought to say this is the ultimate truth. Science is an evolving subject, and that joy or that aspect of communication to people is also important as part of science communication. It's not just saying, okay, wow, scientists did XYZ. That's like the headline, and we are used to just absorbing that passive headline all the time. All media reports are mostly saying, okay, scientists did ABC, or this discovery happened, the Nobel discovery happened, whatever. But it's very hard for people to really absorb what really goes behind that. It is, of course, not that somebody gets up early in the morning and then has this wonderful thought in their brain and they have all the resources out there placed to them in the lab, and then by evening they have some wonderful discovery. That's not how science works, right? So I think one of the second important thing for science communication to do is basically explain to the people how science and the process of science is. And it's funny that I say this because I am not involved in the process of science. So like you pointed out, I am not a researcher. I don't have a PhD, but I think this is important for people to know, because I've been on the other side of the table and wondered about these questions. So that's something that science communication to me needs to address. The other thing, of course, is once you have people's interest, and if they're able to absorb science, you need to make them champions of science, meaning that they don't necessarily have to go and do their PhDs. They don't necessarily have to go and get advanced degrees if they don't have the means, or they don't are not keen on it. But if they have conversations over dinner tables in their families, they should be able to analyze facts, or at least kind of think about what is a rumor or a fake news versus what is exactly evidence based. So I think if these three kind of objectives are met with any effort, whether it's through writing, whether it's through videos, whether it's through what SciRio is doing, any particular effort, in my opinion, if these three are met, I think we could claim that we are science communicators.
Okay, awesome.
Long answer, but yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think it warrants it, because it's the first episode, and we want our audience to understand that, right? So yeah, So right now you just transitioned into freelancing, right? So Shweta is like really very curious what you're up to. I mean, I know what you're doing right now, but she has like a couple of interesting questions she'd want to ask about what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So first of all, you've got to tell us how it is to now transition into a freelance writer from, having, worked at Research Matters. So let's start from there. And I have some couple of questions which I want to ask.
Sure. Yeah. How is it? Like I was never used to an office setup. So the last office I've actually been to was at Cisco. I've never worked in an office since then. So that's been more than 5 years. So with a freelance career, in terms of my mobility and commute, nothing's changed. I'm still sitting at my desk. It's just the geography of my desk has changed, but it's the same kind of setup: my chair, my desk, and my laptop. So that's not very different. What of course is different is again we didn't have a very 9 to 5 kind of a rigid schedule back at Research Matters. I used to work whenever it was convenient. So sometimes it used to be early in the mornings, and when we were in South Africa, I've also worked during my camping trips. So it used to be that flexible, and thankfully I had a organization that didn't really fuss about things like this. What's again changed is most of my time would go with editing back there and planning, because that was crucial. We published 1 story per day back then, and then it had to be like the pipeline had to be filled, right? I need to work on my next story starting now. So that busyness is not there now. Maybe a bit slack also, I don't know, but at least I'm trying to focus on different things, experimenting on different writings, maybe reading a lot, because I have really good access to books in the library here. So I'm reading quite a bit in terms of knowing what other writers are writing about, or how they approach writing and things like that. So that's different, because these readings I used to just kind of bookmark it and forget about it when I was working back then. So that gives me a lot of time right now. Yeah. So that's different. From a flexibility. So many people do the freelance switch because of flexibility. So that I think I already had, so that's not a big thing for me. And also with freelance, I think I can also choose where I work from. So there are days sometimes I just go to the park and work because the desk is so boring, or sometimes I just go to the library and work. And you meet interesting people as well, and thanks to COVID, those meetings are far and few in between. But now hopefully things are going to be better, and I could just talk to a few people, which is nice to know what they think of a lot of things in this world. So yeah, so that apart from that, I don't really see a lot of differences. I just have a post-it notes where I've written that I am my own boss, but I think I'm a very bad boss at that at this moment.
No, you're doing a good job now. Okay, so with that, I think that gives us a clear picture as to what you've been up to. I was also wondering on your takes on the differences between the global perspective on science communication versus the local Indian sort of perspective. So what do you see? What's the difference that you see?
Yeah, so I think back in India, I mean, this is of course my personal opinion as well as my personal experience, because I can't speak for the entire science communicators lot. Back in India, I think we are just very few, in numbers. Like we don't have thousands of people doing this at this point in time, which I'm sure will change over time. So that presents two interesting dilemmas. One, of course, there are a lot of opportunities because everybody is talking about science communication, and everybody wants to have science communicators on the institute, science communicators at, well, not organizations, but different campuses and things like that. So everybody is very jumpy about it. So that's great. Also because it's very new, there is a lot of skepticism, and also while there are more, it seems on the face of it that there are opportunities. It's also like people are not very invested in it. They just want to see how this goes. either as individuals or as organizations. They want to see if this really takes off or not, etc. So and I think at a higher up level, you still need a bit of convincing to say why this is important. Despite the fact that we've seen a pandemic, despite the fact that people are saying, oh, we need more people to talk about it in a way people can understand all that, I think that push is not so easy to come. But switching back to where I am, nobody really, needs to talk about the philosophical importance of science communication, because that's already established. Everybody knows that this is necessary, etc. And there is also fears. I wouldn't call it competition, but a lot of people doing really good job. So that exposes you to a lot of learning, because you have to look up to people who do a very good job than what you do, right? So that's where you can start learning. And that the fact that it opens up a lot of learning is great. And because it also opens up a lot of learning, and there is a lot of mature content of work that is done, gives you a lot of access to resources. Like, take for example the open notebook. So the open notebook from the Indian context would have been very helpful if I had known about it when I started off, but I didn't. Maybe it was just me, but something like that. Some resource curation will only happen when we have enough resources built. I'm not saying that the open notebook will really address the nuances of what we do back in India, but it's a starter. And what India definitely needs is some resource building of its own kind. I don't know, like a parallel to open notebook or whatever. So that's been quite different for me. And also back in India, when we talk about science communication, or when we talk about the medium of doing it, writing may be not the only one. Videos may be a better choice, considering a lot of social constraints out there. But
and
here,
you've also done podcasting for a while, so that's also something that you could.
Exactly. So yeah, the mediums are going to be different compared to what it is here. But importantly, I think it's also the access to communication and people. In India, at least when we started Research Matters, we did have a bit of struggle and cold feet from people when we approached them, because scientists would say, why should I talk to you? They would have, for good reasons, had some kind of like a not so pleasant experience with journalists who may not be science journalists. So often they were very skeptical about being misquoted and things like that. But right now it's changed. So that battle is already fought on the ground that I am in right now. So I don't have to convince people saying that, oh, I will not do it and stuff like that. So those differences, of course, there. And then, societal differences. I'm from a different ethnic minority back here, which I was in there back in India. So that does play a role, because I don't have a fair skin. I don't speak like the way people here do, maybe. So it does kind of, discount sometimes my presence when I have attended meetings. So I'm still kind of warming up to this, the social issue, because for me, this is also new. Haven't really faced so much of, I wouldn't say racism at the stage, but just the fact that I don't look like the others, so I stand out. That's
right. I think both of them have their pros and cons.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's so innate and so spontaneous that probably sometimes it's subconscious even to the people who are treating. But of course, there's a lot of things that needs to be changed. So yeah. Okay, so we'll move on, and since we're talking about science communication, and now we here have you, a science writer for so long, who's been doing this for so long. So we want to briefly discuss a piece that you're proud of, and also sort of want to understand your thought process behind the piece. We're just going to drop the link to the piece in the chat box, and let me just share this.
I'm on it. I'm sharing it on YouTube and LinkedIn. Give me a minute.
Okay, okay. Let me just, yeah. I'm just going to share a screen for the piece. Yes, this piece was published on AAA Science, and I think it's one of the latest pieces that you've written, right? So yes, tell us, like, first of all, like, tell us why you chose this piece with us to discuss it with us.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, for the past 5 years, I have been at the center of what Research Matters was doing. Of course, I have been supported by my great colleagues, a lot of contributors and all that, but pretty much the decision making of what would go online and what wouldn't kind of rested on me. And because it was a small organization, niche organization, I didn't have to pitch to anybody. I didn't have to like validate my idea. I didn't even have to seek permission in any sense. So whatever I thought was good for the audience that we had would go online, and whatever I thought maybe not such a good idea would have to be parked or reworked or something like that. So and sometimes it's bad because I didn't, like I said, I didn't have so much of an experience before I became a managing editor. So I just maybe have written 10 pieces at the max. And that's not the kind of experience one would have before they take on such a big role, I suppose. But I'm so thankful to my boss Sudhira as well as Sandhya, who kind of trusted that I could do this and gave me that responsibility. But with this piece, by the time I wrote this, of course, I was here, and this was like a birthday surprise for me because I had applied for a internship position back in October with AAA Science, thinking that I would make the move, and then. I heard back saying that they were not going ahead with my application, but the editor wrote back to me saying that he was impressed with my application and that I should try, writing for science. I was like, okay, fine. I mean, who doesn't want to write for science? So I was like, okay. And then I just grabbed that opportunity, which came like 2 days before my birthday. And I was like, maybe I should just send out a small pitch right away when things are hot. So generally what the way you would look for studies is you have, as journalists, you have access to some embargoed pieces of research that arrives mostly by emails, and then you can take a look at what is interesting or not. Interestingly, those emails just don't come to me. They go to like a lot of different people as well who are also working as journalists. It's not surprising that an organization like Science has so many pitches coming in. Anyway, like Shweta mentioned, I like to write about animals. So I hear a echo. I don't know from where though, but yeah. So
is this fine?
Yeah, now it's fine. Sorry. So I thought, okay, grizzly bears is a great topic, and then I was just looking at this and I was like, okay, wow, they're running on treadmills. For me, that as a reader itself was exciting, so I thought maybe this could be a nice piece. So I got the lead for this through one of those emails, the embargoed emails, and then I just sent out a small pitch after I read the paper saying that, hey, this is a nice study, I think, because what is eye-catchy to me is that they're running on treadmills, and that is something you don't often see with bears doing. Like, you can get a dog do it maybe because you quote-unquote train them, but then how do you train such big bears, right? So I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, in North America, it's the human animal conflict is very evident with grizzly bears because a lot of people go hiking and camping and stuff, and they do bump into these bears, and there have been some unfortunate circumstances where things have not ended on a good note, resulted in people dying, resulted in people getting injured, and also the bears being put down. So I thought, okay, this is relevant, and the finding was also relevant to people who were actually into hiking and all that. So maybe that would also garner specific readers' response. So that's what I thought, and then I sent out a small pitch. So that was my maybe the first pitch in a very long time to kind of like I actually worked on a pitch and did the whole grind that I talk about in many of the sessions. So that was interesting. And then as soon as I sent it across, the editor on that side was like, yeah, let's go with it. And then here I was writing for the science. And then I was like, okay. And then normally for science writers, the next obvious step is to talk to the researchers and get some context behind the study, gather a lot of thoughts about why they picked this particular topic and what are the implications, etc. And here I was in a new geography. Of course I knew who the corresponding author was, etc., but I also need to talk to an expert who is not involved in the study. And I knew nobody, no ecologists here. So obviously Google was my friend. I looked up and I did find a professor from Canada who works on the ecological part of it. So the researchers who did this were biologists and not necessarily ecologists. So I thought, okay, maybe bringing an ecology point of view would make more sense, considering the fact that this has implications for people who hike and all that. So I reached out to both, and I was very happy that both of them responded very positively to my request. Again, maybe an imposter syndrome or whatever, but I was not expecting, considering that I don't know who these people are. They don't know me. I'm not a famous science journalist here or whatever. But nice people. I mean, they were really sweet. They said, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then again, usually back in India, what I used to do is I would correspond over emails and get them quoted over emails and all that. And my new learning that I've been having from the start of this year has told me that email may not be a great idea to get some of the quotes that is fun to quote. Like, it's not necessarily that people will be very candid on emails. So just talk to them. And with a limited phone, I can't call US, so I set up a Zoom. I mean, it's no brainer, but still. I Zoomed the researchers, and it was great. They spoke to me.
And the audience are making notes.
Sorry?
I hope the audience are making notes, because these are some things that you can never learn from anywhere.
I mean, I'm sure people who are listening to it will have their own journey. So this is not the way to do it, but I thought this is fun for me because, back in India, when I write to people, most scientists by now kind of knew who I was and knew what Research Matters was doing. I didn't have to sit back and think, oh, will I get an email response or not? And this piece was very humbling that way, because I had to get the piece out before the embargo lifted. I had to write it, which gave me 4 days, and there was a birthday also in between to celebrate. So I was like, okay, I have to do it. So it was interesting. And then I got these people responding to me, and they were very happy to share what they've been doing. And, they kind of gave me a lot more than what I asked for, which was very nice of them. So I got this, and then I had my draft prepared, but with all the inputs I had, as well as going through this. And again, here is where things get very humbling as well, because back in Research Matters, I was the editor, I was the writer. So most of my pieces, of course, my colleagues would go through it and then suggest a few changes here and there, but they wouldn't necessarily edit it in the sense that they would change a lot of things, right? They'll be happy to change a few words, or maybe tell me that something is not very clear. And it's very, very hard to self-edit your own piece to that level. Of course, you do a few revisions, but then you can't edit like an editor, no matter if you were an editor.
True.
So when I sent this back, and then it was again, in Research Matters, it would just be one of us editing one piece, but here it's a very well-established media outlet, so there are multiple editors looking at your piece, not just one. So the person who I worked with was again very nice and gracious. She came back saying that, hey, this is a great one, and she's made a few changes, and the few changes were obviously a lot of changes in terms of the flow, in terms of, like what she wanted me to focus a little more on, and some of the quotes that she wanted me to highlight more than what I had already done. And back in India, I had heard that, oh, editing a lot means that you're taking away the writer's piece and making it an editor's piece. But I realized that's not true, because look, this is how people work, and that's not really bad, because that kind of opened up a lot of learning for me, in the sense that, while I have had so many years of writing experience, this is also new to know what the editor from a magazine of this, huge quote unquote reach kind of, does. So it was nice to work with her, and we went through it a couple of times, and then there was another editor who was the I don't know, like, I think they call it the review editor or something. So he was fabulous. So this was supposed to be like a 500-word piece, and then by the time the first editor and me, both of us agreed on it, it became a 600+ piece. And then this editor, he works his magic wand and kind of reduced this back to 500. I'm like, wow. So yeah, and then the kicker that you see right there, right, the last sentence of this whole piece comes from him. It's not mine. And I think that kind of really as to why this is not a picnic or something. It's very nice.
Okay.
Yeah, so that comes from him. And these are things I think we generally learn from editors. So when I was an editor, there have been pieces where I've told people, hey, you know what, instead of opening up a piece like this, maybe this is a better way, or instead of ending it on this note, maybe we should do this way. And I've done this, being on the other side of the table. But for me to experience the joy and the learnings that you get when your piece is edited is a very different experience altogether. So I think that way also this piece was very humbling, and this again was on a deadline, because this was going to be released as soon as the embargo got lifted. So while I had worked with embargoed releases, again, when you are the person running the whole show, it's a very different kind of control that you have on things. But here I had very little control as a writer. Right? So that again, the fact that it did come out just after the embargo was lifted was also nice. And then this piece was one of the first few dollars that I earned on this land. So that is also kind of special in that sense. So yeah, so this whole experience kind of taught me that, pitching as such is hard, but I can do it. Kind of reinforced on my decision that going freelancing maybe is not so bad. And the reason this piece is 3 months old and I still talk about this is because I'm busy with writing a few, writing chapters of my book right now. So I don't necessarily pitch a lot these days, but hoping to get there very soon after I wrap what I'm doing. So yeah, so that's pretty much the genesis of this piece.
Awesome. I as Suchita mentioned, I am going to take notes on this later on. I'll come back and watch the recorded version. So this is a very, like, it's the success story, and behind success stories, there are some failures as well. So would it be okay for you to talk about some of the failed pieces that you mentioned in your email?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think, okay, so failures have been in multiple levels, okay. One thing, I've had pieces where I can share where right now I am working on a piece, but this piece I had pitched way back in October, November. It's not yet out. So from the face of it, especially when you are a science writer, you'd be like, it's not yet out. I mean, it's been such a long time. Yeah, so that this thing is like, but this piece is not necessarily a science piece. It's more on a science writing aspect of it. So I had done all my interviews, done all my reporting, written my piece, went through 3-4 rounds of edits, and then it was killed. Not because the piece was bad, but because the publication wanted me to like focus on something else. So yeah, I mean, when the piece gets killed, the obvious disappointment is like, oh, I put in a lot of work on this and this didn't get anywhere. But I'm in this particular case, I'm not really too disappointed, because the new angle that we are working on right now is kind of opening up opportunities for me to talk to a lot more people in the practice of science writing. So I'm kind of liking that. So I don't know if my new piece is going to be hopefully published but not killed. But yeah, I don't know. So that there's this uncertainty. But yeah, this is like, one kind of failures that we see as science writers. This is not my first piece being killed. Although I I could never kill my own piece at Research Matters. There have been cases where I've written for others, and I've done my initial reporting and it's been killed for I don't know what reasons, but anyway, it's been killed. So when that does happen, not every publication pays you. So although you have your piece ready to be published, you don't get money for it. So that's sad, but yeah, hopefully that will change. So that's one kind of failure. The other failures that I've done is very small, to me, very small, but then very obvious blunders where I've got the names of people wrong. I would say don't do it, but obviously sometimes you don't practice what you preach, right? So I've got that. People who, so at Research Matters, what we also do is when we do a piece, we also send it to researchers to kind of vet the scientific accuracy of it so that we don't get things wrong. So when I send them, they'll be like, yeah, this is great, but it would be nice if you changed my name to what it is. I'm like, oh, so sorry. So that's happened. And sometimes, especially with people who are in different countries, whose culture we are not very familiar with, and whose names we are not very familiar with. There have been gender mismatches that I've done, and then I've been like told very kindly, saying that it would be nice if you use this pronounce instead of that. I'm like, yeah, okay. So that happened. So that again, I would say don't do it to aspiring people, but those mistakes I have done. And sometimes it's been like you are forced to cover certain topics because of the kind of organization you are with, but you inherently don't believe it. So I had written one piece on homeopathy. I don't believe in it. But this was a peer-reviewed and published research. So from a science standpoint, it still made sense. But then the fundamental question kind of arises whether homeopathy itself is a science or not. So while I don't want to get into the debate on this conversation, these are things where I do see that there are conflicts of interest or, some kind of failures. And my very, very honest confession is where I have promised people saying that, hey, you know what, I'm going to cover this nice piece of research. I've told so many scientists maybe, and I get very busy with something else. And I don't have time to go there. I may have done their interviews. I may have also started writing, but life takes over. There are so many ways that like you would move on to something, right? Because this is a 24/7 kind of a grinding job that we are in. Some new papers come up and things like that. So I've been very mean. I've taken their time, but not really seen their research out. But yeah, I'm sorry, but that's what it is. So yeah, so these are broad topics of failures.
Go on. Okay. Yes, we're really glad you've discussed all of these things with us, especially the failures and the things that probably you thought were in your hand but wasn't really in your hand. But discussing all of this only normalizes it, and I'm sure and I know for a fact that all writers and editors face this. So I think the main message that sort of comes out of here is it's okay to mess up a little bit, but be careful, and you don't have to have imposter syndrome. So with that, we'll quickly wrap this section up and move on to the most exciting section now, is the rapid fire. So we sort of kept this section so much to sort of make it a little more fun, and we hope that you rapidly answer our rapid questions, but do take the time and let us know your thoughts, right? So let's quickly begin in 3, 2, and 1. So, what would you choose from one of these dream careers? Editor-in-chief in one of the mainstream media houses to expand their science section, or editor-in-chief in one of the independent media houses focused on science, news, and content?
I would choose one because that's where I think there's a lot of need at this moment. Because yes, two is great. I've done that. Maybe one is more challenging because in the broad scheme of things, I want to make sure that science also gets a lot of headlines.
Okay, awesome. So, if you had to choose to communicate science in one language, which one that would be? English or Kannada?
It would be Kannada if people pay me, but often that's not the case. But yeah, if there is a paid job with Kannada, I would love to grab it.
That's awesome. What was something you had to unlearn to become a science communicator?
A lot of my engineering stuff because when I write, say, something about AI or quantum computing and things like that, it's very natural for me to like not really bother about the nuances because I already know. I've learned it in college. So unlearning that to write about technology was a journey.
Okay, so a couple of true or false questions. You need to be a writer to be able to become a better podcaster, but you don't have to be a podcaster to write. True or false?
This was a toughie. I don't know, actually. Maybe I'll just say it's false because you can be everything. You don't have to just have any causal relationship.
Okay. The next question is inspired from one of your latest tweets. An editor's job is thankless and mundane. True or false?
It is in fact true. Often it is. But then there are days which you brighten up your the whole work. So yeah.
Okay. So what's one thing you love about being an editor, and what's one thing you hate about being an editor?
I love about the fact that I learned so much being an editor because if I was a writer, I would just pick, one particular genre of a topic to write about. With being an editor, all my learning has been like, I go from neutrinos to neurons because I'm an editor. So that's interesting. And what I would hate sometimes is the job of editing comes at the cost of writing because you have only 24 hours in a day, and especially with the kind of work I was doing with research matters with one story per day, which is quite an ask. Not always do you have the time to write about topics you would have loved to, and there have been days where I've felt that gutting feeling in my stomach where I was so interested to write about a topic, but I had to, hand it over to someone else to write about it. So yeah, sometimes I'll be like, oh my God, I should have written about it. But yeah.
Okay. So what would you prefer? Being a science columnist in a top print media place, or go to small towns and villages to interact and talk science?
The second option, because that kind of puts me like around people. But honestly, I'm an introvert. Maybe I suck at it, but I would like to attempt it.
Okay. And one last question. So, what's one thing you'd like to change in your career?
The way people pay us, maybe, if I could. If not that, on a personal level, I just want to kind of experience. On a personal level, I just want to kind of experience different forms of writing. Like the column that I'm doing for Deccan Herald is very different from what I've done in the past. I also want to go to the field and report, which I've never done. So I probably would love to do that, although I can't even drive here, so I don't know how I'm going to do that. But yeah, that's something that I would love to at some point in time, to just go to different places, meet people, and do a journalist kind of an approach to science. Right now, my journalism just comes from armchair journalism.
Okay, okay, awesome. Thank you so much for answering all of these questions. So we'll head on to a few questions from people that we've received through social media. And right now, I don't think we have any quick questions here during live, but we've gathered a few questions that people have asked us. So yeah, go on, Shweta.
Okay. So before we go on, I had one question to ask, if I may. So what are the kind of resources, you mentioned Open Notebook. So what are the kind of resources that beginners should have a look at, or what helped you, in other words, if there are any?
Okay, basically two set of resources, I would say. I would classify them. One, observe a lot of science writing that others are doing. I mean, this necessarily doesn't have to be, like any particular handbook. It doesn't have to be in a handbook, but just broadly scroll about what other news outlets are doing on science. For me, I really like what Guardian is doing because it's free and it's nice. I also like what some of the people back in India are doing, like the Wire Science is doing a great job. Of course, Research Matters to me is obviously doing a great job. So on an international level as well, I like a few like so long you can access New York Times for free, you can also read their science coverage. Atlantic is doing a fantastic job. So a lot of media houses across the world, just keep an eye, just see what science journalists and science writers are writing about. Magazines, Nat Geo, Smithsonian, all of those are great. The other set of resources would be definitely to kind of handhold you with your writing process. Like I said, Open Notebook is free. It's on the internet. It kind of helps you tackle specific problems with science writing. There are a few others, like the Science Writers Handbook that was kind of released with NASW, the National Association of Science Writers, which I'm a member of at the moment. So they have a good resource that they have collated over years. And then I wish there's something like that for India as well, but not yet. So hopefully somebody will do it. I don't have the time, but yeah, somebody will do it. And then I also like, if you go to Nieman Foundation, or if you go to the Harvard, I think it's called the Harvard Nieman Foundation, they have a lot of resources. Pulitzer also has a lot of resources from a journalistic standpoint. They don't necessarily, talk about science, but then gives you some more tips about how you can approach something journalistically. Gives you a sense of how you want to do investigation pieces, and things like that, which can involve society as well as science. So these are resources, and again, pick your genre of writing, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, because there are fantastic science fiction writers as well, whose work is amazing in kind of getting that people to be curious about science. So pick that, and then there are a lot of writing guides specifically, and then of course talk to people, talk to fellow writers, they don't necessarily have to be writers, even your audience, right? Just to know what they expect from science writers and things like that. Keep the communication channel open. I don't talk a lot in terms of going out and talking to people. Not too good at that, but I do keep a tab on what's happening on Twitter, what's happening on various other social media, just to see where conversations are, what are the hot topics. But also be aware that social media is often an echo chamber. I interact with people who I think like me, act like me, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the more knowledge you let flow into you and you absorb it, I think you can find many insights from all of these.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we just began the live session, you mentioned how important conferences have been for you to network, and that also changed the way you write, right? So could you elaborate a little bit more as to how that experience changed the way you write, or changed the way you think, and so on?
Sure. So when I started out with Research Matters, we did not have so many avenues to kind of talk to other science writers. So and of course I was also geographically in a very different continent, so I wish there was a lot of push on Zoom and other things like this, but it wasn't yet. So also I hadn't heard of science writers associations from different parts of the world and things like that. So when I wrote this piece for Asian Scientist in 2017, there was this one award ceremony, so to say, and again I couldn't go there, and I was lucky because my in-laws were staying in Singapore and they had the opportunity to go, and they bought me a book from there saying that, hey, you know what, we met the PhD comics person, John Cham, I think that's his name is. So he had this wonderful book coming out about the universe. So my father-in-law was sweet enough to buy that for me, and he said, you know what, we met him. So I was like, at some point in time, I was quite jealous because I thought, oh, maybe if I had been there, I would have gotten to meet a lot of people that I admire their work. So I couldn't go there. And then the next thing came to me through the EurekAlert fellowship. That was for me an international experience of a different kind, because I had been to the US before that as part of my work. So it was not about, okay, discovering the US, going to a new country. No, that was not on my plate. But what was interesting was that I met people from different parts of the world who had also, won the same fellowship. And I was trying to kind of gather how mature this whole writing atmosphere is in their countries. And turns out with developing countries, we are almost on the same kind of levels. But however, in the developed part of the world, science writing is moved beyond just newspaper articles and things like that, because right now they're talking about how you bring equity or diversity in science writing and things like that. These are topics that are in their very, very, infancy is even not the word, pre-zygotic stage, possibly in India, because we are still solving other bigger issues in some sense. So that kind of opened up to me, saying that, okay, so once you do this, there is still a lot of things for us to do. It's not just getting this one thing right. So that kind of opened up a lot of questions in my head. And then there was already a well-oiled mechanism of how you pitch a book, for example. How do you, get an agent to do it? How do you even pitch to a news outlet? Because back in India, not many news outlets actually allow you to pitch. So it becomes more of an ivory tower for you to, get your article out there. But here it's more like, if I may say, in some sense, more democratic. So anybody can write. If so long your ideas are good, so long you can, convince your editor that you can do a good job at this, you can write. So that's very different, because back in India, we are very, very closeted about who writes and who doesn't. There's a lot of gatekeeping that also goes on. Maybe it does in this part of the world, but for me at that point in time, I was just awed by the fact that, oh my God, this is so well oiled. These are things that we are still fighting out back in India, but these are already taken care of very well in some parts there. So that kind of really helped, and also to understand what India needs, or what kind of coverage we need to do in our work. So one of the other things that really blowed me over, and I also wrote about this on a LinkedIn post, is how scientists become the press meet organizers and speakers there. In India, I had never heard of scientists going on a press meet and giving press conferences and all that. I've only heard of politicians doing that, or mega super celebrities doing that. But scientists being celebrities was new to me. And they were so eloquent to the press. They knew how to answer, how to really tackle questions and get to a level which is just good enough for the press to absorb. That, I think, back in India, not many scientists can do it. When you ask them a question, they'll go back to a paper and then reproduce sentences from there. That's not what we want. So there's a lot of learning that still needs to happen. But for me, that was a very different feeling, to have a scientist give a press conference about their own paper. So that kind of blew my mind. And I hope to see more of that happen back in India. They don't have to necessarily organize a press conference, but at least they need to be in a platform to actually share what they've done. That would be a good stage for science communication in India to be. And some of that did happen with the pandemic and with voluntary organizations like ISRC, etc. But we need more of that often, and we need more of that on an ongoing effort and not just a one-off thing. So these were like, really life changing in some sense to me, or at least eye opening insights for me through going to these conferences.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, maybe we will probably see all of those changes that you just mentioned as the community grows. So let's end on a positive note. So I had a personal question. So, uh, are, can you share any of your memorable encounters while maybe researching about something that you wanted to write, or as an editor, or while pitching and so on? Uh, that it would be great if you can share a memorable encounter as like that.
Sure. So one thing is when I had an opportunity to interview a Nobel-winning scientist, because for what it's worth, when we are growing up, that's an award that is very cherished for people, for the society as such. To win a Nobel is something great, right? So when I had a chance to interview Professor Brian Schmidt, it was great. I really envy my colleague for this, because he had the chance to go, and while I was sitting back in South Africa, he was right there next to him. I'm like, no, this is not fair, but it did kind of give me a chance to put across my questions to the person, to the scientist, and to the educator that he was, and then kind of write a piece about that. So that was really something nice. And then I had again encounters, so to say, but not in terms of this close an encounter with other scientists whose names I've always admired. At least brush up, say hi, kind of a scenario. And this is something. And again, my work took me to the corridors of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Not that I idealized this, but just that otherwise it would have been hard for me to go to a structure like that, walk inside it. Maybe I would have seen it through the roads that are across the Rashtrapati Bhavan. But this was very humbling for me, because my work would, kind of take me there. And apart from that, some of the research that I've done has actually helped me personally, because I did it for my work. Examples could be when I learned a thing or two about how neurons and neurotransmitters work in the brain. And I have a dog, and he's a rescue, so he's on the edge all the time. So that kind of helps me make the connect back here to see how things are kind of influencing or affecting him. So these are like small building blocks. And because of my work, me and my husband, we talk about like a lot of things under the sun, and not just mundane daily chore kind of interaction. So that's nice, I thought. Something different that I cherish because of my work.
Okay, okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. But there was this one question that I always wondered, and I really want to ask this with you. It could be probably a very strong question to it towards the end, but I really want your perspective on this. So, do you think you need to be financially privileged to be a science writer in India or anywhere else?
Yeah, this is a good question. And honestly, I think I can speak of my experience. I was definitely not in a state where I had to worry about my next meal. So I was kind of, I had quite a lot of savings from my previous job, which was high paying. So that kind of, helped me stand on my foot for a long time. Pay, especially in India, is very, very, very hard to come by. Of course, my job was a paid job, but then even to get those salaries on time is a hard ask. So I necessarily don't blame just the organization, but it's just that even what fuels this, right? This whole ecosystem needs to change for things like that to happen. So yes, you need to be privileged. You need to be beyond just thinking about where your next meal is coming from. Definitely, that's very unfortunate, and that's very sad for the whole ecosystem of science also. But yes, that's reality as well. So you do not mostly get paid as much as you deserve, because people with their PhDs are also writing science. So they need to be well compensated for their work, and I do believe they need to be well compensated for the kind of change they bring into the society. And this is not a one or two organizations or publishing task alone. This is a whole systemic issue, and this has to be addressed at various levels with a lot of infusion of money for this purpose. You can't say science communication is just an afterthought after you have released crores of grants for a particular project, right? So we need this as a systemic effort to say that yes, this is important, and this is important for various reasons, goes beyond a particular project and goes beyond a particular research that is at hand, right? So I think that realization can help people who are not so privileged as me and you maybe to kind of practice this. So I think that is true at this moment, and it's really sad that this is true.
Yeah. Right. Do you have any concluding statements or any sort of a message that you want to give aspiring science writers or science communicators?
So yeah, I mean, I I don't think I've done so much in life to give anybody any message. I am still kind of discovering my own. So what I could tell, what I wish I had told my younger self is that read as much as you could. I was not a good person at reading, though I used to write. I was not a good reader. So being a reader and a listener is very helpful, is very beneficial, not just in your career, perhaps in life, more of a philosophical statement, but still it is. That's one thing. The second thing is, especially when we come from backgrounds that are not in, grounded in research and academia, like, I'm not a PhD, I'm not a researcher turned science writing. I come from a very, very different kind of a societal setup with engineers, because in India, where engineers are placed in the pedestal, right? You stand way up, and you're prepared crazy because honestly, I think engineers are overpaid and also exploited, of course, but they're overpaid. But I also want to kind of share that much of my work is after I became science writer, I have developed a lot of humility because I see this from a very different perspective. The issues that we see at hand, the inequality, the inequity, so to say, not just the inequality in the society. All these are things that you don't see when you are in a ivory tower of your own with a very nice privileged job and a very privileged degree, so to say, that is well paying, and things are working for you. I think kind of when you switch shoes and when you switch to a different profession like this, which gives you a more insider view, I think some of your beliefs and some of your I don't know, perspectives really are shaken, and then you realize what exactly the society is, and it kind of gives you a lot of humility. So I do say that to my engineering friends and my engineering colleagues, that at times do get out of it, and see what's happening. And I think the fact that you are overpaid, or at least you are well paid, will give you, or will put you in a position to change your life, to change lives for a lot of other people. So if you have that privilege and if you have means of doing it, just do it. I mean, don't think about it whether, oh, this is a deserving cause or not, because it is, especially when it comes to communicating what people are doing in their labs. It definitely is.
Thank you so much, Spoorthy, for giving that humble message out, and a lot to think for science communicators and for people who are sort of privileged and can support this entire ecosystem for science communication, right? So I hope, and I think we are in the direction where things are changing, and things are changing for good. So for hopeful times, and thank you so much for taking your early morning on a Saturday to join us on this live show, and for the first episode where things are, something is very new and uncertain. So thank you so much for that. With that, I'd like to conclude this show, where I'd want to thank all the audience who are here. And stay tuned because the next episode is going to be aired on 30th of July, and we have Somdata Karak, who's from CCMB, and her journey is again a very unique one which you do not want to miss. In the meantime, we have something very interesting going on in SciRio. So we have this event called SciComm Fosters, where we invite an experienced science communicator to share the learnings and experience of a particular skill or theme. And coincidentally, as we launch SciComm Souls, the next SciComm Foster we have is Ipsa Jain, where she's going to talk about how you can become a freelance science communicator in India and how hard or how the entire journey is. So I think that's going to help you a lot. We're going to drop the link in the comments. So if you're really interested to check that out, you can check that out there, or you can always visit our website for the same. And of course, if you've liked the show, please do share and spread the message, and let your friends know, who might be interested in science communication but have no clue about what that is. So help them discover this very beautiful career form. And yes, with that, I'd like to conclude the show. Thank you, Shweta, for co-hosting this show, and thank you, Spoorthy, for joining us again. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me, and yeah, wish you all a great weekend and stay safe, and yeah, see you soon again.
Thank you, Spoorthy.